Hey guys, Aaron Cybertron Zhang here, and today I'm back with another episode of Road to Ranked, where I climb the online Regulation D VGC ladder in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet and provide live commentary as I go. In this video, I'm going to be using the team that Tomoya Ogawa used to win the 2023 Pokemon Video Game World Championships in the Seniors Division. Tomoya's team features a lot of fun picks like Choice Specs Sylveon as well as Zapdos and Hisuan Arcanine, and it's easily one of my favorite teams from the Regulation D format. I actually had the honor of commentating the Senior Division World Championship Finals. If you want to watch that, I'll link it down in the description below. But Tomoya played so incredibly well, and this team was just so fun to watch. So I'm really excited to try it out as we wrap up the Regulation D format. As always, I'll do a quick breakdown of the team, but if you want to just skip to the battles, check out the timestamps down in the description below. And thank you so much as always for joining me. If you enjoy, would really appreciate it if you consider leaving a like in the video or subscribing to the channel. It really helps out a ton. Anyway, let's dive into things. Breaking things down, as always, rental, pace, and team creator are linked down in the description below, and Tomoya also wrote a team report for this in Japanese if you want to check that out, also linked down below. To me, the main star of this team was definitely the Choice Specs Sylveon. It put in so much work in the World Championship Finals, and it's just a really underrated pick in the Regulation D format. Most players opt to use Flutter Mane as a strong fairy special attacker, but Sylveon has a couple of things going for it. First of all, Pixelate is just an incredible ability, and Hyper Voice just does so much damage across the board. Sylveon also has some really nice natural bulk in HP and special defense, and it ultimately can just be a little bit more bulky than Flutter Mane, for example. The general idea behind Sylveon is that it's not very fast, so a lot of the times your opponents will be moving before you, but the Sylveon has a lot of bulk to work with. You also have Tailwind support from Zapdos. With Tailwind from Zapdos, the Sylveon can outspeed base 100s and everything slower than that, and you have Intimidate support from Hisuan Arcanine. In fact, Hisuan Arcanine and Sylveon is actually one of the go-to leads with this team. The idea is to get an initial Intimidate off with this, and then just put on pressure with Hyper Voice immediately. So when you think about things that really give Sylveon trouble, it's Pokemon that resist fairy type attacks. So that's Pokemon like Heatran, fire types, steel types, for example. So that's why you have Pokemon like Gastrodon and Urshifu on the team, because it really covers for those types. This Sylveon, by the way, has Hyper Voice, Terra Blast, Hyper Beam, and Sleep Talk. You're mainly clicking Hyper Voice, but Terra Blast is actually a pretty reliable single target attack. Fire Terra, Terra Blast also can be valuable, obviously. Hyper Beam is something that can really nuke a Pokemon and just completely eliminate it when they don't expect it. And then Sleep Talk is really helpful against Amoonguss, because Amoonguss can be a little bit annoying for this team. So you've got Sylveon here. You've also got the Arcanine. So Arcanine here is pretty standard. The one thing to call out is that Fairy Terra plus Terra Blast. This is really valuable, especially into Pokemon that are weak to Fairy, so Dragon types, for example, or Fighting types like Urshifu. And so one of the cool things you can do with this Hisuan Arcanine's Fairy Terra, Terra Blast into Urshifu, and either just get a one-hit KO or bring them down to Sash and then Extreme Speed them. The rest of the moves are fairly standard here. So Hisuan Arcanine and Sylveon should be one of the go-to leads with this team. But to round things out, you've got Gastrodon. This is just a pretty standard Gastrodon set. You've got Rocky Helmet, which just allows you to chip away at things. For example, if you're up against Champao might want a Sacred Sword Arcanine. You can pivot that out into Gastrodon, get that Rocky Helmet, and get some free damage. And this is just the standard Gastrodon set. Fairy Terra is used here. There are a lot of different viable Terras on Gastrodon, in my opinion, but I think Fairy Terra makes a lot of sense here. You have Rillaboom, and I think the Rillaboom on this team is actually really interesting because there's no Woodhammer, there's no Stomping Tantrum, for example, and it is Ghost Terra. So the idea behind this Rillaboom is that it can deal less damage, but it's more utility based. You've got Drum Beating for speed control, and that's really nice with this team because, as you'll notice, nothing is like max speed, right? Everything is just really bulky and will be able to stay on the field for longer, but your main means of speed control are going to be Tailwind from Zapdos and then the Drum Beating from the Rillaboom here. So this Rillaboom is more utility oriented. You also have Leftovers plus Grassy Terrain, so you heal back pretty significantly at the end of each turn, and the Grassy Terrain is also just valuable for the rest of the team. You've got Dark Urshifu here. This is a Poison Terra set with a lot of bulk, as you can see, very little speed investment. And once again, the lack of speed is mainly explained by the fact that you have Tailwind support from Zapdos and the Drum Beating support from Rillaboom. So the idea is that Urshifu here can put in more investment into bulk, and with this bulk, you'll survive a lot of attacks your opponents generally won't anticipate. A lot of people like using Dark Terra on Urshifu to just kind of deal more damage, but Poison Terra is a really nice defensive Terra. And since this team is slower paced and bulkier, I think a defensive Terra makes more sense. Really valuable, of course, into types that would otherwise hit you for super effective, especially Fairy type, for example. The last Pokemon is Zapdos, and this is just a bulky Zapdos set designed to set up Tailwind and annoy opponents with Tailwind, as well as Thunderbolt and Hurricane. Roost plus Static is honestly a really nice combination. I cannot tell you the number of times that my opponents have used a physical attack onto Zapdos and just gotten Static activated, and this Zapdos just has so much sustain thanks to Citrus Berry and Roost. Hurricane, just a nice move, although not the most consistent. It's just your strongest kind of flying special attack if you don't want to use Terra Blast, for example. Terra Blast is kind of more consistent, but Flying Terra, Terra Blast Zapdos, not exactly that common. And I think with this team, Zapdos is a good Terra option, but everything is really flexible in terms of Terra. So even though this move is going to miss fairly frequently, you're going to stay on the field with the Zapdos for a long period of time, so it makes sense to run. And Thunderbolt kind of just a standard move. So with this team, it's really just kind of asking where you can deal super effective damage, I think, often. I think Sylveon is going to be your primary attacker, but Urshifu deals really significant damage as well as Arcanine. The Gastrodon and the Rillaboom are more utility-oriented, but Gastrodon can obviously have an incredible matchup into Pokemon like Iron Hands, Landorus Therian, for example, Tornadus, where you can just get these super effective hits off. And Rillaboom, really valuable, of course, into Pokemon that are weak to grass-type attacks. So if you're up against an opposing Gastrodon, for example, this can be really valuable. Zapdos, kind of just good utility, good speed control. Thunderbolt and Hurricane do decent damage. At the end of the day, this Zapdos doesn't really have much special attack investment, so keep that in mind. But yeah, generally, I think I first ask myself how I can play around Sylveon best, because to me, that's the star of this team. So I'm bringing Sylveon in most of the games, and I'm trying to figure out how I can best support it. The question I often ask myself is, do I want to lead Sylveon immediately? If they have a lot of things that maybe resist Sylveon, I'd potentially consider bringing this out in the late game. But I think an early Sylveon can just poke a lot of holes, and like, Hisuan Arcanine plus Sylveon with just 2 of these 4, it's just such a strong combo of 4, and Tomoya in his team report basically said, like, this is kind of what I do. And you can watch the World Championship Finals also to get a good sense of how kind of Tomoya utilized this combination. But a lot of different leads, right? You can go with Zapdos if you want to put on Tailwind pressure, like Zapdos Urshifu, for example. Zapdos Hisuan Arcanine, I think, is fairly strong as well. You could go with Zapdos and Sylveon, but keep in mind that Sylveon's not exactly the fastest Pokemon, so even with Tailwind support, you're still getting outsped by things that are higher than base 100, so your Chimpows, for example, your Fluttermanes. So be careful when you utilize Tailwind with this team, because you're not the fastest, right? Like Sylveon is just fairly slow. Rillaboom here, for example, it's not the fastest Pokemon, but under Tailwind, it will outpace most things. But Gastrodon, for example, it's not really going to be able to utilize Tailwind very well. And so even though you have speed control on this team, you still have to think about, am I actually going to outpace my opponents after setting up the speed? So yeah, that's it for a quick breakdown. Now let's highlight some weaknesses. So in terms of weaknesses, I think Amoonguss can be a little bit scary to play around. Tomoya specifically called out the combination of Iron Hands and Amoonguss, which gives this team some trouble, which makes sense, right? If you are like bulky Assault Vest Iron Hands, you can just go for example, Heavy Slam onto Sylveon, you can Drain Punch into really everything else, Wild Charge into Zapdos, and Static doesn't even affect into Iron Hands. So that combination in particular can give this team a lot of trouble. I think Amoonguss is scary. You do have some counterplay with Rillaboom being grass typing and then Sylveon just being able to potentially eat up a Spore and Sleep Talk, but the thing is that takes a lot of setup, right? And if Sylveon's clicking Sleep Talk, you don't know which one of the moves that you're going to pull, and that can be pretty scary as well. And so I think a well-played Amoonguss can give this team a lot of trouble, because if you lead Amoonguss, like, it just exerts a lot of pressure. You do have moves to hit it for super effective damage, Flare Blitz here, Ice Beam here, Hurricane here, for example, but Amoonguss is so tanky that often to KO it, you're going to need to double up into it. And for example, Amoonguss just puts on pressure, right? And if you feel compelled to double up onto it, Amoonguss protects, and the partner Pokemon next to Amoonguss just gets a big attack off. That can be really scary. So that's something to think about. I think with this team as well, you're generally slower paced, so you're a little bit more vulnerable to bad luck. For example, getting flinched, getting crit before you really get the chance to move, that can be pretty scary as well. I have found that strong ground type damage can be scary, especially if you don't lean into Zapdos and Rillaboom and go with the core of Gastrodon, Arcanine, Urshifu, and Sylveon, because then nothing is resisting ground, so that's something to be wary of. And one other thing to note with this team is that you don't really have any ghost resistances other than Urshifu, and so ghost type Pokemon in general and ghost type attacks can deal pretty significant damage. So things to watch out for, like Choice Specs Fluttermane, for example, with Shadow Ball. That can, I think, not necessarily be a really bad matchup, because you have Arcanine with the AV, you have Poison Terra Urshifu, for example, as well, but that's something to just keep in mind because it can deal a lot of damage. So yeah, that's it for a breakdown. Let's get into the games. We've got Hisuan Arcanine, Dragonite, Chien-Pao, Torn, Hands, and Golden Go. Sylveon's incredible against the middle 4. Not so great against Golden Go and the Hisuan Arcanine, but we could Fire Terra to resist both fire as well as steel type attacks. I think kind of the default with this team is just Hisuan Arcanine plus Sylveon, or one of the defaults. I like that a decent amount. I think the fear is probably going up against Dragonite Chimpao with the inner focus on Dragonite. But I'd say inner focus on Dragonite in general is just going to be a problem for us here. Gastrodon looks really good here into almost their entire team. I think Rillaboom feels bad here into Hisuan Arcanine. Really into their whole team. Like, everything can hit it for really good damage, and we don't do much damage in return. So then the last one would be between Urshifu and Zapdos. What Zapdos allows us is a Tailwind option. Urshifu, though, has Wicked Blow and Sucker Punch. I think the priority from this makes me lean more towards it. Yeah, I'll go with this. I think the one downside here is by not bringing Zapdos, I'm a little bit weaker to Tornadus specifically, but I think my question is how willing or how much does my opponent actually want to bring the Tornadus into this matchup, given that they know I have Zapdos. And I kind of just like the damage output from Urshifu more. They're going to go with Torn Enhance, which I'm okay with. We get an immediate Intimidate off here, and Sylveon I think is super well positioned right now. Oh, wow, it's Clear Amulet Hands, though. That is interesting. Okay. That is that's like the best item they could have here. I would suspect a Fake Out into Sylveon turn 1. So I'm thinking about launching a Flare Blitz immediately out into Iron Hands. They could also just like Tailwind Heavy Slam, I suppose, which scares me a little bit. If I Fire Terra, then I become like, you can Wild Charge or Drain Punch me next turn. Okay, I'm just going to Flare Blitz Hyper Voice, predicting the Fake Out on Sylveon turn 1. But they don't Fake Out. It's just Tailwind. Yeah, Tailwind Heavy Slam. Okay. But Sylveon is bulky enough to survive that. Could have considered the Terra there, I think. But I think in the grand scheme of things, this is honestly fine. We'll get Hyper Voice off. And obviously you can't be Assault Vested, so that knocks out Iron Hands. Cool. Yeah, the bulk on the Sylveon here is really nice. I think the main thing, basically what I didn't want to do is commit Terra on turn 1, have them click Fake Out into that slot, and then turn 2 just go for like Bleak Windstorm, Wild Charge, or Drain Punch into Sylveon, because then it's kind of a waste of a Terra. And they bring out Chimpao. So now you probably just Bleak Windstorm and then Sacred Sword into this, which means going for a Terra on Hisuan Arcanine is really good. I could also... I'm thinking about switching Arcanine out into Gastrodon to get that Rocky Helmet damage. And then bring Arcanine back out for Intimidate as well. But I think if I just go Terra right now... they're probably sashed anyway, so I can Terra Blast to take less recoil here. So Terra Blast and Hyper Voice... basically, the logic here is then next turn, if you knock out the Sylveon, I just bring out Urshifu and I pressure with Sucker Punch Extreme Speed. Whereas if I switch, yeah, maybe I break Focus Sash thanks to Rocky Helmet, but how helpful is that actually if I can just have a lot more damage out on the field immediately? Yep, they go for Sacred Sword, and that's exactly why you want to run Fairy Terror on Hisuan Arcanine. That was a crit, and we still don't take that much damage. Bleak Wind here is actually going to miss the Sylveon as well, which just wins us the game immediately. And that's the risk of using Bleak Wind and not targeting down the Sylveon slot with Chimpao. So we're going to get Terra Blast here into the Chimpao. And yep, as you can see, it brings it down to Sash anyway. So why use Flare Blitz and take more recoil damage if we don't need to? The miss just wins us the game 100%, but, you know, even without the miss, Sylveon feints, Urshifu comes out, and like I said, I pressure with Extreme Speed Sucker Punch. The main debate then, the subsequent turn, would be to predict whether or not Tornadus would stay in, or go for a switch as Chimpao tries to protect, right? But let's see what my opponent's last one is here. It is going to be Dragonite. Okay. Curious about the item on the Dragonite, but yeah, we can just go for Terra Blast now and Hyper Voice. This lead is incredibly effective with this team, and I think this game demonstrates just how much pressure it can put on. Sylveon, first of all, taking that heavy slam, which was really nice, and then being able to deal so much damage with the Hyper Voice, right? We were able to just get a knockout onto Iron Hands, 2 Hyper Voices knocked out the Tornadus as well, was able to finish off Chien-Pao. Like, my opponent just didn't have very many good Sylveon answers, and I think that is one of the key pieces to this team and why it won the World Championships, and it was really cool to see it specifically in that Senior Division Finals as well. So, yeah. Okay, we've got Ursaluna Crest, Dragonite, Urshifu, Flutter, Iron Hands. This team got top 4 and top 8 at the World Championships in the Masters Division. How do we feel about the Hisuan Arcanine Sylveon combo here? Pretty decent, I would say. I think Zapdos probably doesn't come out in this one. Dark Urshifu is really good into Ursaluna and Cresselia. Gastrodon here with Yawn, not exactly the most helpful, but Ice Beam into Ursaluna is valuable. Rillaboom here is awkward because we have Drum Beating instead of Wood Hammer. The Grassy Terrain does reduce Earthquake damage from Ursaluna. I guess the other debate is, do I really need to lead Hisuan Arcanine and Sylveon? But I think I like that still. I think I want Urshifu here. And I think I want to... I'm definitely not bringing Zapdos, so the decision is between Rillaboom and Gastrodon as the final one then. I lean towards Gastrodon here. I think Earth Power and Ice Beam is just a good combination, and we can Yawn into Cresselia as well, which I think is helpful. But the lead, once again, is designed to just maximize damage output immediately, and they don't have very many good Sylveon answers. You could just lead something like Iron Hands plus Cresselia probably, but if you do that, then I get it Intimidate off into your hands, and then Sylveon's looking really good going into turn 2. And they do go with Hands and Cresselia. Okay. So we'll get an immediate Intimidate off here. Onto Hands. I've got Urshifu in the back. I think Fake Out definitely goes into Sylveon here right now. I'm personally okay launching Flare Blitz onto Iron Hands and just Hyper Voicing. The idea is, behind this play, by the way, is that we don't want Ursaluna to come in for free right now. Because I could see Iron Hands potentially switching out into Ursaluna as they Trick Room. The idea behind that play is that you just get your Trick Room up immediately, while also getting the Flame Orb activated on Ursaluna. So I think that's the main thing we're trying to cover for right now. I don't want to get fancy and like switch out into Urshifu just for my opponent to hard switch Iron Hands out. But they're just going to click Fake Out onto the Arcanine slot, actually. Okay, that works for me. Probably add a Fear of Will-O-Wisp onto the Iron Hands if you haven't seen this team from Worlds. Ton of damage from Hyper Voice, and Cresselia just sets up Trick Room. Okay, that's fine by me. Could be something like Helping Hand Heavy Slam now onto Sylveon. You could also Drain Punch into the Hisuan Arcanine. I think I don't mind a switch into Gastrodon right now. I'm just a little bit worried about Ursaluna, right? Because it's kind of just waiting to come out right now. If I were my opponent, I would probably Drain Punch into Hisuan Arcanine and then go for a Lunar Blessing as well. So I'd like to switch out into Gastrodon here and Hyper Voice. Yeah, since we have the Intimidate on the Iron Hands, I'm not as worried about something like a Heavy Slam onto that slot. So we'll swap out. I think the main thing to consider is Swords Dance Ursaluna. Okay, they actually just go straight for Heavy Slam, but we survive. Yep. And I get the Hyper Voice off as well. Could have gotten a double knockout there then if I stayed in, but I think switching out Arcanine is fine because it covers for Ursaluna. Cresselia notably actually slower than Sylveon as well, so we're faster under Trick Room. That actually makes things pretty interesting, yeah. So, like, Ursaluna comes out. Knowing that I'm... should outspeed Cresselia with both of my Pokemon right now, right? I wonder if you just go for Earthquake. I've got Arcanine kind of waiting to come out right now. But if I switch it in onto an Earthquake, that would feel kind of bad. They could just Protect here right now. And like Lunar Blessing, for example. Swords Dance Ursaluna is probably what I'm most worried about. So I think here I'd like to get a Yawn off into Cresselia to force that to switch out. And I'll click Hyper Voice here, because I can see Ursaluna Swords Dancing or Protecting. They're going to commit a Terra here, though. So probably a defensive Terra on the Ursaluna. Which makes me think you're not Protecting then. Ghost makes sense. Now you're not weak to Ice Beam, but the upside of Ghost here for us is that our Urshifu can just go for Wicked Blow onto that slot now. So we get Yawn off into Cresselia. What does Ursaluna do here? Yeah, it Swords Dances. Cool. That's a really good turn for us then, in my opinion. Hyper Voice is going to do so much damage here. Yeah, and they go for Lunar Blessing, but that's fine. It does not get rid of the effect of Yawn, which is the biggest part for us right now. So, with this situation, there's 2 turns of Trick Room left, and I've got a Urshifu with Wicked Blow kind of waiting to come out. We can also defensively Terra that, which helps out against Fluttermane if that's their last one, or Urshifu if that's their last one. So I think here, the debate is really, who do I want to conserve in this endgame? Because Hisuan Arcanine kind of just wins against Fluttermane. And with Fairy Terra, it's actually very, very good, yeah. So I think I'm content protecting here and then just sacrificing the Sylveon. And the idea behind this is then I can bring out the Urshifu and then just protect Urshifu, sacrifice Gastrodon, and then have an endgame where it's my Hisuan Arcanine and Urshifu with my Terra still not even being used outside of Trick Room, right? So they'll knock out Sylveon here, but that's more than okay with me. Yeah, I think Sylveon just did so much work in this game, in the early game with Hyper Voice. And they go for Lunar Blessing again. Yep. That's fine. You can see how good Lunar Blessing is, right? Especially with Ursaluna. Like, that Hyper Voice did 50%, and now they're just back up to full HP, basically. But Cresselia now does critically fall asleep. And Burn reactivates on Ursaluna. Cool. So now the idea is we get a free switch into the Urshifu. So we'll bring that out. I think the main question I have is what I want to do with the Gastrodon slot. But I think just getting a little bit of extra chip damage onto the Ursaluna so then I can just Poison Terra Urshifu and then Wicked Blow to guarantee a knockout onto that slot is fine. So I'm happy to just Earth Power and Detect here as we stall out Trick Room. The question is what my opponent's last one is, but I think regardless of what it is, all of our Pokemon are well positioned for it. For example, if it's Fluttermane, Poison Terra Urshifu plus Hisuan Arcanine kind of just beat that. If it's Dragonite, Hisuan Arcanine is a pretty good matchup as well. I think the main question then, if it is, CB Dragonite, for example, with the... Oh, and also one really scary thing here is if they get a 1-turn Wake Up this next turn, and then get an Ally switch off with Cresselia. I wonder if I actually should be playing around that possibility. It's like, do I make the read that they go for Ally Switch? Because if they don't wake up... Yeah, it's one of those situations where it's like, if they don't wake up, then it would just look really silly, right? So it's like, I think if you're my opponent, you kind of have to go for the Ally Switch right now, but you'd have to wake up as well. I think to hedge my bets here, I'm just going to go for... Do I want to commit my Terra here immediately? Because they might Moonblast into Urshifu, obviously. If I Poison Terra here immediately, CB Dragonite with Stomping becomes a little bit scarier, but would you really bring Dragonite into this matchup is my question. We're also bulky here, so I'm not sure Moonblast even KOs us. I think I'm just going to go Rock Slide here and Wicked Blow onto Ursaluna. Okay, they protect. Well, that's the best case outcome, I would say. Cool. That works. I guess they were hoping that... Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to accomplish much with Protect and attacking with Cresselia here, in my opinion. This is one of the reasons why late game Urshifu is just such a monster in this format, right? But yeah, I don't like... I could have Poison Terra here to cover for a one-turn Wake into Moonblast, but Cresselia stays asleep. Cool. With that, I think that should just secure us the game. That might have been a little bit greedy, but I held on to my Terra because, one, I was like, what's the likelihood of them actually going for... And they bring out their Urshifu. Okay, cool. With that, I can just Fairy Terra now, which is the perfect counter into their Urshifu. Terra Blast into Urshifu. Yeah, that works. And... I'm happy to Sucker Punch here as well, I think, just to guarantee the knockout onto Sash Urshifu. Because Hisuan Arcanine should beat Cresselia in a 1v1. So, we'll go for this. Yeah, the other question I have is whether or not close combat even knocks out my Urshifu. I don't actually know that damage calc off the top of my head. You could theoretically go for... Yeah, I guess in this position... Maybe Poison Terra, my Urshifu is actually a better play there. Actually, yeah, I think if I were to replay this turn, I would have gone Extreme Speed onto their Urshifu, and then Poison Terra, Wicked Blow onto Cresselia. I think that was better. I just got excited to use Fairy Terra Arcanine. Crest stays asleep. Cool. So that should win us the game. But they were going for Ally Switch there, I think. So that turn actually could have played out kind of ugly if Cresselia got an early wake up there. Yeah, I guess with Ally Switch as an option, I never really have a 100% safe play there. Maybe it's doubling up onto their Cresselia. But I also have to call who to Terra in that position, right? So I ended up Terraing the right Pokemon. But that was still pretty scary. And that's one of the reasons why I think Cresselia or Ursaluna is such a strong composition. Your ability to even just completely flip things with one Ally Switch is a really, really big deal. I do want to do the damage calcs after this game from Moonblast and Close Combat. But yeah, Urshifu was very essential for the end game here. Stall out Trick Room and then just deal so much damage. I think Sylveon was also an incredible attacker. The problem with Sylveon is that I don't really have a way to like 100%. I was going to say, I don't have a way to deny Trick Room. I could have gone Rillaboom Sylveon as a lead in this game. Turn 1 Fake Out into the Cresselia. But then my Sylveon just gets hit by Fake Out, and then turn 2 U-Turn Hyper Voice doesn't KO Cresselia anyway. So yeah, I think it's really difficult to like deny Trick Room outright in this game. I could also go Rillaboom plus Urshifu lead. Fake Out the Iron Hands, Wicked Blow into Cresselia, but then Cresselia probably Terras defensively. So then that also like doesn't 100% deny Trick Room. But in this game, ultimately, like Sylveon was really good, and we were actually able to stall out Trick Room. The Yawn onto Cresselia, kind of putting it to sleep and putting pressure onto that slot was good. But we did get lucky that Cresselia didn't wake up immediately. I think a one-turn wake or could have been really scary for us. And even if it had woken up that last turn and gotten a 2-turn wake, that also could have been pretty bad for us, I think, since it was ally switching. That being said, because they ended up targeting the Hisuan Arcanine slot, even if ally switch went off that turn, I think we still would have been in okay shape. Because, yeah, Hisuan Arcanine is just really well positioned from that point on. So then the question is, what happens the subsequent turn? But yeah, let's pull up the calc real quick, because I don't know the bulky Urshifu calcs off the top of my head. So pulling up the damage calc, Moonblast from Cresselia with no special attack investment never gets a one-hit knockout onto this Urshifu spread. It's interesting to note that on these compositions with Cresselia plus Ursaluna, a lot of those Cresselias will not run special attack investment. If you look at the versions of these that performed well at the World Championships, that often is the case. However, an interesting meta shift recently has been people running Ice Beam and Psychic with a lot of special attack investment on Cresselia that won the Pittsburgh Regional Championships. And so there are multiple different Cresselia sets that are out there, but the one on this kind of composition that runs Trick Room, Lunar Blessing, Ally Switch, and Moonblast generally won't have special attack investment, so this calc is really good to know, and that's why I did not go for the Poison Terra with Urshifu. And for Urshifu's close combat onto Urshifu, it is a guaranteed knockout, even with the amount of bulk that you have, so keep that in mind. And that's kind of why I played the way I did in this endgame, where I was like, 1, I figure I can survive the Moonblast from the Cresselia, and 2, I don't want to commit my Terra too early on, because if I'd committed the Poison Terra immediately into my Urshifu, then the next turn when my opponent brings out their Urshifu, they know they can get a guaranteed knockout with close combat onto the Hisuan Arcanine. So Fairy Terra, such a critical defensive typing for us to have there, and ends up saving us the game. Okay, this is the World Champion team. I don't know if it's the exact rental, but if it is, then, you know, we've got things like Taunt, Goggles, Urshifu, as well as what was on the team. Specs Flutter with Grass Terra Energy Ball, just offensive triple attack Chien-Pao with Sacred Sword, AV Iron Hands, and then a pretty unique Landorus. I personally think Arcanine and Sylveon continues to be really good here. I think we should just bring Gastrodon. Even if they don't bring Urshifu, I think Gastrodon's still a pretty good pick. Zapdos for Tailwind isn't bad here. It's also... I think the main thing is probably playing around Fluttermane. I'm interested in Rillaboom here because I think the speed control from Drum Beating is actually pretty cool. This could also Terra, but then we kind of become weaker to Landorus. I think I'm going to go with Zapdos here. Yeah, I think Zapdos having Hurricane Pressure is quite nice. I will say one of the things to note with the 4 that I brought so far is that Amoonguss is kind of annoying. One interesting thing we could do against Amoonguss is actually Flare Blitz Hyper Beam it if we think they're going to Water Terra turn 1 and just like eliminate that immediately and get rid of their Terra, but that's a very high commitment play. I'm honestly thinking about it though, because I think if you're my opponent right now, you just probably think that's your safest play on turn 1. I would personally Water Terra this and then try to Spore. The downside is you could Protect and then say just Moonblast. So it's the likelihood of whether or not they click Protect. But yeah, I think I'm going to go for it. Flare Blitz and Hyper Beam. And just try to deny Spore immediately. So I'm really hoping, like, ideally it would be Flutter switch out, Amoonguss Water Terra, and then tries to Spore something and we just get a KO. That would be the absolute best case outcome right now. The worst case outcome would be Amoonguss Protect, Flutter just Moonblast into Sylveon. Which could happen, but I think then it's really risky. Okay, we see a Terra. Hopefully it's Amoonguss and not Flutter Terraing. If it's Amoonguss, I think this is already really good. Nice. So this is what I was trying to force out, right? I guess the question is whether or not I even get the knockout with Flare Blitz and Hyper Beam. Like, did I need to be even more committal and go for something like Rock Slide to deal even more damage? Oh, they actually just went for Rage Powder, though. Huh. Okay. And Shadow Ball onto Hisuan Arcanine. Like, Hyper Voice plus Rock Slide would have just won us turn 1 so hard there, but I still don't mind making this play. That being said, it actually puts me in pretty awkward shape going into turn 2. Yeah, I thought it would be Spore there every time. Not that it makes a difference, I guess. Because I went for this double up play anyways. We do get the 1-hit KO. Yeah, so that's what I was going for. The main thing was to deny Spore. So, yeah, seeing Rage Powder doesn't really make any difference. If they had clicked Spore there, we would have gotten the knockout anyway. But, yeah, nice Shadow Ball into Hisuan Arcanine, honestly. I think that was a really good play. Right now, the Sylveon slot is rendered useless. Let's see what they bring out. Chien-Pao. Okay. And I can't Terra Sylveon, which is like one of the main downsides, right? You can just Shadow Ball into this again. Ice Spinner into this. I think I would like to switch out, but into who is the question. Shadow Ball was just a good lock, honestly. Could be into Zapdos. I can pressure with the defensive Terra Tailwind. And this is the downside of going for Hyper Beam, right? Like, I felt like I really needed to deny Spore, which is why I went for it. Given the Rage Powder, though, it's like, yeah, if I went Rock Slide Hyper Voice, then we would have been in amazing shape in this game. Because then I would have been able to just Hyper Voice again the subsequent turn. But, yep, here's Shadow Ball into the Zapdos slot. Let's see how much this does. 197 to 88, okay. So I can survive another Shadow Ball next turn, which is pretty critical right now. Yep, and crash into Sylveon. If you're my opponent, I think you would probably consider just going for Shadow Ball into Sylveon now. Icicle Crash into Zapdos. So personally, I think I want to defensively Terra right now. Go for Tailwind. And then Hyper Beam. Into Flutter. I feel like the main thing in this game is, yeah, just like the amount of resources I had to commit to deal with the Mungus, plus just how fast my opponent's team is, right? The Shadow Ball into Arcanine turn 1 was a very nice play by them. And there wasn't really too much I could have done to get around it. Spec Shadow Ball just, yeah, honestly does so much here. Okay, they end up Shadow Balling into Zapdos. Which we survive. Ah, okay, it's a double up onto Zapdos. That's a nice play by them. Because it covers for the Terra. Yeah, so Zapdos will faint. It's going to be an interesting endgame, honestly. I'm very curious what my opponent's last one is, because I think Gastron actually has a really good matchup. But we're going to get another Specs Hyper Beam off. Does this get the one-hit KO? Nice. Okay, that's huge. So we get the KO there. What can my opponent bring out right now? Iron Hands, Landorus, Urshifu. I think we want to just bring out Hisuan Arcanine first to get the immediate Intimidate off. What is that going to be? Landorus. Okay, yeah, so the idea here right now is that Gastrodon should be pretty well positioned, but I don't have recovery on Gastrodon, which I think is what makes this kind of scary. What I can do right now is... And we're actually faster than Landorus. Okay, that's actually really good to know as well. So what I'm going to do here is pivot out immediately out into Gastrodon and then just sacrifice Sylveon. This game I feel like really showed you the value of Hyper Beam Sylveon though, right? We got 2 one-hit knockouts essentially. I guess Amoonguss had taken a little bit of damage, but yeah. I think the main scary thing is kind of just getting outsped in this game. Zapdos is our best means for speed control, but by not leading it, it just went down early on, right? So the reality is that this team doesn't have any ghost resistances or immunities, so Specs Flutter with Shadow Ball is just a really good pick. And with the Amoonguss support, I felt like I needed to take care of Amoonguss first. So they're going to Ice Cold Crash onto Sylveon. That's enough for a KO. Yep. But I think Sylveon's done what it needed to do in this battle. And they're Stomping Tantrum onto us. Cool. You eat up Rocky Helmet damage as well. So now I get Arcanine for a second Intimidate. I wonder if Sacred Sword even KOs us. It probably does, right? Huh, that's actually a pretty interesting endgame. If I were my opponent, I would probably be protecting Landorus and then Sacred Swording into Hisuan Arcanine. I want to Yawn into this and Extreme Speed into it, I think. I don't know if Extreme Speed is actually necessary, but Ice Beam should KO this. Yawn. Maybe I Rock Slide. It would cover for a Chien-Pao Protect here. I actually like Flare Blitzing more, in case Chien-Pao does Protect. But they just end up Sacred Swording. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, this is actually going to be really close. There's another Stomping Tantrum. Not very much damage. You take more Rocky Helmet damage, and I get Yawn off. Maybe I did need to Extreme Speed, actually, because Extreme Speed plus 2 Earth Powers would have knocked out Chien-Pao for sure, I think. Yeah. Now I can Protect. This is going to be really close. I should have just stuck with Extreme Speed, I think. I tried to get a little too fancy there. Because I think, yeah, E-Speed plus 2 Earth Powers definitely is a knockout, and I think with that, it would... whereas, like, right now, Earth Power getting a 2-hit knockout is a damage roll on Chien-Pao, I believe. Okay, so Chien-Pao falls asleep. Now the debate is, do they go for a Protect with this? Because I can Earth Power into this, but... I think I'm just going to go for Landorus right now. They do end up Protecting, though. Okay. Just Chien-Pao protects, or takes a turn of sleep. Ice Beam fails. Go for Ice Beam again. I think my main question is whether or not an Ice Skull Crash knocks out our Gastrodon after another Stomping Tantrum here. Because, like, Landorus has gotten 3 Stomping Tantrums off, right? But I actually think we survive Ice Skull Crash. So then what I want to do is actually put the Chien-Pao back to sleep with another Yawn. Yep. So I'm actually just going to click Yawn here, expecting it to wake up. If it stays asleep, which it does, then I, like, Earth Power there into Yawn would have done it, but the odds of them waking up there are pretty high. And what I don't want to do is click Earth Power, have them wake up that turn, and then just win the game next turn. Chien-Pao wakes up. There's Ice Skull Crash. Yep, we do survive. And I get Yawn off. Okay. But this is the problem, right? I think my endgame here was a little bit sloppy, because I could have Extreme Speeded into the Chien-Pao, and I could have clicked Earth Power the turn that Landorus protected. If I had done both of those, then this game would have been won 100% at this point. But the lack of both of those plays means that I still have to get to an endgame where Chien-Pao falls asleep right now, and then it's a question of how early does Chien-Pao wake up? If they take 3 turns of sleep, we just win the game for sure. So we have a 1 in 3 chance of winning right now. Also, they click Ice Skull Crash. I think they should just be Sacred Sorting. But yeah, it's like, do we get high rolls with Earth Power first of all? Because if so, then we just need a 2-turn sleep instead of a 3. Oh, that's actually a pretty high roll. Well, that just actually immediate. Like, now it's a question of whether or not they wake up this turn. And they stay asleep. Wow. Yeah, that Earth Power already did more than 50 on the first one, which was really nice, and the special defense drop just guarantees us the game. But like I said, this endgame was sloppy on my end. I could have read into Landorus protecting. I could have Extreme Speeded into the Chien-Pao. Both of those. Like, the Landorus turn, I think that's a little bit tricky, because if I make the prediction that it protects and it doesn't, and they get another free stomping off, I think I actually might just lose the game off that, and I really didn't want to play against that possibility. But Gastrodon in this endgame was able to take so many attacks, right? Like 3 different Stomping Tantrums and an Ice Skull Crash from the Chien-Pao. But yeah, I think what was mainly really scary in this one was Amoonguss. I could have brought Rillaboom out, but without Assault Vest on Rillaboom, I think it's kind of scary. Yeah, the main thing was seeing them Rage Powder instead of going for Spore on turn 1 meant that I could have gone for Rock Slide Hyper Voice. And then, like, Sylveon being locked into Hyper Voice in this game is just so good for us, because like, the main downside in this game was, like, yeah, I get these big one-hit knockouts, but then that slot's just, like, rendered completely useless, right? So I think my opponent made some nice plays throughout the course of that battle as well. Like, Shadow Balling, for example, into Hisuan Arcanine. I think that was a really good play to start off the game, realizing, hey, like, Ghost coverage is just really good against your team. You don't really have a way to resist it. So I think that was really smart. Put me into a slightly awkward position immediately. And then going for Protect with Landorus, for example, later on in the battle, also very nice. And then the double up turn onto Zapdos was also huge for them. Because if they don't get that double up and they knock out Sylveon, for example, then I set up Tailwind. And then once I get Tailwind up, I can bring out Hisuan Arcanine and go for something like Roost, for example, as well as a Rock Slide or a Flare Blitz. Wow, this is a fun combination of teams that we saw at the World Championships. Fergref and Dragapult, which finished second at Worlds, almost won the tournament. Solo Dondozo, which won the North American International Championships. I was like thinking about, like, no, I didn't win Worlds. Dondozo, Rillaboom, and Volcarona was actually a core that was paired with Grimmsnarl at the World Championships. So it's really interesting to see, like, these different Pokemon kind of thrown together. And then a King Gambit, which I haven't seen in quite a while. King Gambit makes Hisuan Arcanine way less viable. And I'm really worried about the Dragapult Farigiraf lead combo. I feel like I get cleared by that here. Because you just Ghost Terra Dragapult, Terra Blast everything, no? The lack of Ghost resistances or immunities we already saw in the previous game was pretty scary, and I'm very worried right now about Dragapult Farigiraf. Wait, but there's no Chien-Pao. Hold on, I don't have to. You don't get the defense drop. Maybe I don't need to be that worried then. I want Zapdos then, I think, for Tailwind. Zapdos, Urshifu, Sylveon, Hisuan Arcanine. I don't know if it was a mistake to not bring Gastro or Rillaboom here. I feel like maybe I needed Rillaboom to deal with the Dondozo. Like, by dropping Rillaboom and Gastrodon, I'm leaving my 2 best Dondozo answers on the bench. And I don't know if that's the best decision. Farigiraf and Dragapult, yep. If I were my opponent, I would personally go for potentially Ghost Terra, Terra Blast, Urshifu. I don't even want to click Tailwind here, though. I mean, I don't think Farigiraf's going to Trick Room here, right? But I need... Okay, yeah, I will go for Tailwind and Detect turn 1. I just think, like, Dragapult being able to Ghost Terra, Terra Blast everything is too much of a problem right now. So the hope is I Tailwind, and then the next turn, because you're banned to Dragapult, if you commit your Terra immediately, which they do, this means I can target a lot easier next turn. What I didn't want to do... Oh, it is Farigiraf Terraing, though, into Fairy? Water? Oh, Water is interesting, because I can just Thunderbolt you now. Okay. To me, though, the question is, what does Dragapult do right now? You obviously can't go for Terra Blast, so it's probably Phantom Force? Oh, it's Darts. Okay, that's fine. But if they're Trick Rooming with Farigiraf, this gets really ugly, and I feel like you might be doing that with that turn 1 play. But I was really worried about Ghost Terra, Terra Blast here. Oh my gosh. Yeah, they actually Trick Room. That's an impressive play. Because basically, like, if I do anything else there on turn 1, I actually should be really well positioned. But now I'm in bad shape. $236. Yeah. I can switch in Sylveon, though. I think I need to do that right now. I can't Sucker Punch you. I really didn't think they would actually Trick Room on turn 1 because of the amount of pressure Dragapult exerted. That was just an awesome play. Basically, if I go for Protect and I just attack on turn 1 with Zapdos and they just go Ghost Terra, Terra Blast, turn 2, they're still threatening my entire team and outpacing my entire team, which is why I play the way I did there. Okay, I'm just going to switch in Sylveon. I think what I can use to my advantage right now is Sylveon being slower than Dragapult, even under Tailwind, and so I can pressure with the knockout with Hyper Voice next turn, but Zapdos should go down here. Okay, yeah, they go for Helping Hand Darts. That's fine. To me, Dragapult was, with Choice Band was such a big problem in this matchup that I need to maneuver in a very particular way to get around it, but now we've positioned Sylveon out, which is really critical. So, I'm okay with this. Sylveon out. I would rather bring out the Urshifu because I want to conserve Intimidate from Hisuan Arcanine. Urshifu hits the field. What's your switching into Hyper Voice? It's King Gambit or Volcarona. Dragapult should switch in this position. I want a close combat. Because I'm really quite worried about King Gambit. And if Volcarona comes out, yeah, then I can just switch out into Hisuan Arcanine. So I'm going to Hyper Voice Close Combat. Oh, they just stay in Psychic. Okay, that works. Because Hyper Voice here should just knock out your Dragapult, and then Close Combat gets redirected into Farigiraf. Yeah. I think the main thing there is taking advantage of the fact that Dragapult is Choice Banded and saying, well, okay, I know that that slot is just going to get outpaced by Sylveon right now. So we actually get a double KO. So even though turn 1 went kind of awkwardly for us, I still have my Terra available to me. I still have Hisuan Arcanine as a switch in. But there's still a lot that can go wrong for us from this position. And I would actually argue that getting a double knockout is actually not as ideal. Like, I would have preferred Farigiraf to have stuck around. Mainly because that Farigiraf does not put on very much pressure against my Pokemon, whereas now they get 2 free switch-ins. So yeah, there's King Gambit and Rillaboom. It's going to be a close finish. You can't Terra though, right? So like close combat from this will just demolish Gambit. Thinking about Fire Terraing here. to survive Iron Head and Wood Hammer. I think switch into Hisuan Arcanine. How many turns of Trick Room do I have left to stall? It's only 2. So, like, an Urshifu endgame looks really good right now. All I have to do is survive. Hisuan Arcanine, Terra, Hyper Voice. I don't think that was my best play here. I needed like 15 more seconds to fully think things through. Because I don't know if activating Defiant really is the best call. But I really wanted to reset the defense drops on the Urshifu. I also could have gone for Poison Terra with Urshifu. Which is interesting. Worth considering, honestly. I think the main awkward thing is in this position, I can't get a knockout onto either Pokemon, and then there's still one more turn of Trick Room left. But they actually don't click Fake Out, which is huge. Swords Dance Rillaboom, what? Whoa. That is the one move my opponent could have had to save them. Okay, so now you can just Stomping Tantrum this and Kowtow Cleave Sylveon. So what I want to do is pivot Arcanine back out into Urshifu. Oh my gosh, I didn't expect Swords Dance. That's so cool. And if I just stayed in with the Urshifu this last turn, I think I also could have won the game. I don't love that I'm making this switch, but I kind of feel forced to. I don't know. With the Grassy Terrain recovery, I figured Rillaboom can survive an extreme speed. You could just Wood Hammer that slot, I guess. Okay, so it's Kowtow onto Flutter, or sorry, onto Sylveon. Swords Dance, that's so cool, man. Yeah, because without that, my Hisuan Arcanine can just Flare Blitz either slot next turn, but they do just go for high horsepower. Okay, good. I think if you go Wood Hammer there, you just end up winning the game, but I think now what we can do is Trick Room expires. I bring out Hisuan Arcanine. You are at +2, so you can Sucker Punch me, but I resist that still, so I think that's fine. You would need a crit Sucker Punch onto Rillaboom to win right, or sorry, onto Urshifu to win right now. Because what we do is just close combat into you. And I get extreme speed here so that they can't get a knockout onto Hisuan Arcanine. If you Sucker Punch here and high horsepower here, we survive, and then I just Wicked Blow Rillaboom for the win next turn. If you Sucker Punch into this and I E-Speed KO you, then I just win the game immediately as well. So I think this covers for all my bases. Yeah, E-Speed barely does anything there. Wait. Oh, with Citrus, they actually might survive Wicked Blow next turn. I am playing this like it was a Regulation D game, so I forgot about the potential of Grassy Glide. Fortunately, even with that double up, it's not enough to win, but a crit there could have been ugly. Yeah, Glide's damage output is just significantly weaker. Like, base power reduced, and Rillaboom's just at neutral attack right now. It's clearly a bulky set with Citrus plus Swords Dance anyway, so yeah. Now we can just Sucker and Flare Blitz. But I had to say, Swords Dance Rillaboom, that's really cool. I have not really seen that before. But this will deliver the finishing blow now. Yeah, I thought I was like getting fancy there with the extreme speed play. And because of Grassy Glide. I mean, like, the thing is, we don't know what the Regulation E rule set's going to be. I assume Grassy Glide's going to be allowed, but for Regulation D, with the new tutor moves, they're still not allowed in the format. But yeah, Ladder currently doesn't actually match like what tournament rule set is. So that could have been scary if they got the crit. But yeah, the upside of Dark Urshifu is we just resist Sucker Punch so much, so even though they're at +2 attack, you just have no damage. But my opponent definitely made the right play there. If I wanted to cover for what they did, Flare Blitz onto one of the 2 slots would have been adequate to cover for the critical hit. But yeah. That's going to be it for this one. So thank you so much as always for joining me. A huge thank you and congratulations to Tomoya for becoming our new Senior Division World Champion. What a blast it was to commentate his final set. And yeah, if you asked me in the beginning of the format whether or not I would have expected Sylveon to become a World Champion, I would have definitely said no, because I'd be like, Sylveon, I mean, Fluttermane exists, right? So to see this team take it, to see Hisuan Arcanine also get to the very top after it was introduced to VGC, to see Zapdos win as well, I think is really, really fun. So yeah. Huge congrats to Tomoya. Thank you to you all as always for watching. Leave a like if you enjoy, and I'll see you all soon. All right. Peace.